nitakungoja, nitakungoja, ninakungoja Yesu, ninakungoja, 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 nitakungoja Yesu, nitakungoja, 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 ninakungoja Yesu, ninakungoja, ninakungoja, ninakungoja.
Is the season finale. We can finally say that as a show, and as usual, we're very excited to be coming live to you and thanking you for tuning in and joining us live. And for those who watch later, we also appreciate you very, very much. My name is Jasmine Wangai, and I'm the host for today. You'll see later that the real host is present, but we'll say much about it later. And what I'll start by doing is introducing our team for today, the panelists for today, who will help us take time to reflect on the COVID season. I mean, this is pandemic, it's global. The pandemic has been global, and we wouldn't want to just end the year and move on like that. We'd like to take some time and reflect and get to know, were there things that God was teaching us, you know? How has the situation been like, and what lessons and reflections did we learn and have from this season, and really what to do as we look forward to a new year. And to help us do that, I'll introduce the team, and I'll start with my co-host on my right. So karibu sana.
Thank you so much. And finally, you got on the right-hand side. I'm Eunice Njoroge, part of the staff team here in the admin and HR department. Thank you.
Karibu sana. And we can continue over there.
Hi everyone, my name is Lorraine Bundi. I serve here as well as staff team at Mamlaka Hill Chapel, Ruaka, and I'm happy. This is my first time to be on midweek. Bye. Najua it's ending, but the Lord has seen me. I'm happy. I'm really happy to be here.
Karibu sana, love.
And hello everyone, my name is Ann Soy. I'm a Mamlakite and a journalist. I report mostly on health across Africa. Thanks for having me.
Karibu sana, and Soy, it's a joy and an honor to have you. As you can see, the rest of the team is really in-house. You said you're a Mamlakite, but you're also a special guest today. So we're really, really glad to have you. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
So she's a relative. Yes, you are family. Really.
You are family. You indeed are family. Karibu sana. Karibu.
Asante.
And now we can head on to my left.
Right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's my joy to be with us this afternoon. And my name is Maggie. I am the wife of our bishop. She's on my left. And I am just so delighted to be here this afternoon.
And that's the host I was talking about, guys. So you can imagine what's happening today. Niko hapa, because the host is watching whether we are doing a good job. But karibu sana.
You are doing
Maggie.
a good job, so I am so delighted to be hosted by you today.
Karibu
Yeah,
sana.
thank
It's an
you.
honor.
Yes, and I'm excited to be here. I was listening to the host. You know, she's the one who demanded that I be here. She issued a decree, and since I want to go home later, you know, I obeyed. But I'm very excited also to be sharing a podium with Ansoy. you know.
Yeah, I forgot to say that
Yeah.
I am so excited to have Ansoi with us today.
Yes.
And actually, she's so much family.
Yeah.
And she's been for the longest.
Yeah.
But to have you on this show today, we
Yeah.
really thank God for you. Karibu.
I'm really glad to be here.
Karibuni sana.
So thank you so much, Anne, and thank you for accepting our invitation. And in your line of duty, really, you have been across a lot of information specific to do with COVID, as Jasmine has said. And I wonder if you can just tell us, bring us up to speed and just paint a good picture of where you think the world is at. We're aware that the world has said this is the second wave. Where are we at? And you can eventually narrow down to where Kenya is at.
Thank you so much. Yes, as a journalist, we get to speak to many different people, those frontline workers. We speak to communities that have been affected. We speak to policymakers. And there has never been a challenge like this in living memory. You'd have to go back decades and probably even centuries to find something comparable to this one. So it's the challenge of our times. And in terms of the continent and Kenya, I can say that Africa had the gift of time, and so they saw what was happening in Asia, in Europe, and then America, and so they were able to prepare. And when we have looked at the response over the last couple of months, especially initially, Africa looked way more prepared than the rest of the world and handled it very decisively. And that's why we have seen, and contrary to the predictions that were made very early on, Africa has generally done so well. And that includes Kenya. We didn't get it all right with all the tear gas and the misuse of the security forces. We don't need that to fight the virus. But generally, I think because of the decisions that were taken very early on, they were able to sort of control the spread, really slow it down. However, much later we are seeing people realizing, okay, things are not so bad after all, and we are letting our guard down. And that's really worrying. We're seeing more and more countries doing elections, so huge rallies where people are not maintaining any, observing any of the measures that we have been advised by health workers. And that's really worrying, and we're seeing the numbers are beginning to pick up across Africa. And that's something that we really need to think about even as we continue. The rest of the world is really challenged. Europe is going through a second wave right now. They're announcing even stricter lockdowns than before. But it's a balance as well, because we saw the impact of lockdown is that it really impacts livelihoods. People lost their jobs. What's the use of staying at home if you can't feed yourself? But we can stop this. It's down to our individual responsibility.
And Anne, as you talk about COVID and how Africa suddenly looked like the hero, I've never been so proud to be African, apart from when our athletes have won, and suddenly you go with placards and Kenyan flags. And this is another time really that we can say, Africa, set the pace. But what are some of the things that you think, as you have gone about your work, that has helped us to be more prepared? Because it's one thing to say we want to be prepared, but we can just probably sit and just pray and go to keshas. Are there things that really, really that Africa and maybe Kenyan country did to be ready for the COVID pandemic, so to speak?
In February, when the first case was declared in Africa, that was in Egypt, there were only 2 countries on the continent out of 55 member states of the African Union who could conduct the kind of PCR testing using the right reagents. That was South Africa and Senegal. But then we saw within weeks that they were able to scale that up. Up until now, we have almost every African country who can not only carry out the tests, but they're able to do so in different parts of the country. And so there was leadership, there was the gift of time, and therefore that allowed for preparation. But there was also experience. Because when you talk about malaria, polio, HIV, Ebola, you name it, we are so experienced dealing with infectious diseases. So when you're told, stop shaking hands, wash your hands frequently, these are things that were used to deal with Ebola, and people already know them. So you simply do that. Wear a mask. It's not a question of, as we have seen elsewhere, but this is my right. It's my right not to wear a mask. So I think that experience really came into play.
And how have you seen specific individuals or stepping in as a community to ensure that this is happening? Because it's one thing, yes, we're saying we've had experience before, but it feels like this specific one hasn't hit, or rather the ones we had experienced before hadn't hit globally. You know, this is global. What are some of the specific things you've seen people do?
I think people are taking it seriously. Let me say we're taking it seriously because I think we've let our guard down. And I can compare it to the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa. You remember it's the one that shocked the world, partly because it's the one that we exported to the West. And so when the West realized, oh, Ebola can come here, so we need to deal with it while it is still in Africa to prevent it coming. And this is something that I covered. I went a few times to Liberia, Sierra Leone, where the outbreak was largest, and the other countries that were also affected in West Africa. What was interesting was the fact that, Liberia, for example, it had come from, many years of war. And so that had really crushed the public health systems. They had only 3 ambulances in the entire country of more than 10 million people. They had 100 doctors because, you see, when there's war, the people who can leave the country.
Yeah, they do.
And often it is the doctors, it is the professionals, because they can find other jobs out there. And so most of them had left. You've settled there, you have children. So you want to go back home, but you have bills to pay, right?
Absolutely.
So the health systems were really on their knees. But we saw them come together. We spoke to a chief, for example, in Sierra Leone, who ensured that in her community people were following the protocols so that if there was a suspicion that somebody has been exposed, they were isolated and their contacts were traced. We went to homes in Mali, for example, that were under quarantine for 14 days, and they were adhering to that. And the Red Cross was going to test them, to do a checklist. Every day, check the temperature, ask if they have had any symptoms. And people were cooperating. So that's really what this is about. It is about that individual responsibility. Many of these countries were not really endowed, but because when they finally figured out how to prevent this, they went into, everyone taking responsibility to prevent infection. And that's what happens with infectious diseases. You can stop it at one person, but we need all of us to take personal responsibility and just follow those. They're simple rules.
Incredible. Incredible. Thank you, Ansoy. You know what's coming to mind? We have the honor and the privilege of having the bishop and the 2 reverends, Reverend Maggie and Lorraine here. And I think it would be prudent for them to represent the church. I think something important that Anne is bringing up is the community. There's the individual response, which eventually builds up to community response. And so a question that we have for today is this specific community that Anne is referring to different with the church, or is the church a part of the community? And if it is, what will be a charge for us as a church, to ensure that we are joining efforts, to be able to reach where the specific country she's talking about. 3 ambulances in a country, 10 million people, yet they were able to curb and take care of this. What will be our charge for us and to the people watching us today?
Let me say what my wife told me. One of the things, for real, we were having this conversation earlier, and one of the things I think I remember Maggie saying is that because we are a church, we are wired for care, for nurture, for loving people, caring for them, and so on. And because the church, fortunately, I think one of the strong points maybe that helped us to deal with this as Africa is that the church still has a place of honor within our community, and is a magnet that draws people to a place where they can find each other, they can fellowship, can be cared for. And even without COVID, we have many needs. Being less developed, there are issues of poverty, there are issues of hunger. For example, just what we did here at Mamlaka Hill Chapel, our food pantry was one of our great takeouts. We had a rich food pantry. People gave, and we would distribute food. We had a distribution point. And sometimes I'd be driving in and I would see people walking out with loads of food. And I know those are families that are going to be fed. And that's out of the generosity of the members of this church. And they would give and give both in city and here. And so people are attracted to the church because they know this is where we can get help. So I think even in times of pandemics, for example, just the pool of medics that come here, I think many of them are in the front line, of doing so many different things and helping. I mean, we got tested here. Our own medics are the ones who, would arrange for that. They come to the venue, have us tested and so on. And so I think there are very many points at which the church can and has intervened and given people hope, because that's our work as a church. We must keep hope alive, because we may not have an answer to the COVID, but we do have a response as a caring community. And because there's a focal point here that they know once we go to church, there will be leadership, there will be help, and there will be, just practical ways in which we can be able to intervene. And we've done that. The food pantry was just one of them, because obviously we know one of the biggest effects, way before, like the wave before when we hardly knew people who were directly affected by COVID, but we know that the first impact was actually on livelihoods. The fact that you couldn't go out and work, that is unprecedented. And immediately people can't get food, then that becomes, the situation deteriorates very quickly. And the fact that we could give that as almost as fast responders in terms of, come, if you're a member of this church, and I'm proud to say that, we said no one need go hungry in this season because they are not working. And we said we will take care of you. And we made the appeal, and people brought food. And I could see families coming here, getting what they need, and they were doing it in a dignified way, And that makes me proud to feel, the church can do something. And I'm sure there are many other areas that we can talk about.
He spoke my point. So I'm going to speak his.
I asked you for permission.
Yes, I think one of the things we shared, he's shared, when we're talking about this, is the place for compassion. Because of Christ, because of his compassion on the life of Christians, because of the compassion of Christ on the life of the church is aware of their need to share the same compassion. And the other thing about compassion is we are compelled by Christ. The church is the most aware, a body that is aware of the fact that they're compelled by Christ to share his love. And for that reason, the church can never sit pretty when there's need out there. The church can never sit pretty when the world is hurting. So the world will look to the church, and rightfully so, because the church doesn't need to be paid to pray. The church doesn't need to be paid to love. Already we have been loved. Freely we have received, freely we give.
We shall give.
Yes. So another thing about the church is that church is such a big body that has critical mass. And sharing information is so really, it should be easy and natural to the communities. So I would talk about Mamlaka and the wider Church of Christ, that the church is positioned to be able to give information. The church is positioned to share the need of the people to the others who are able to listen. Then lastly, is that the church is a conglomeration of all the skills and giftings and resources of the world.
That's right.
If you look at the congregation, we have our doctors, Bishop has said that, we have our journalists sitting with us, we have our accountants, our lawyers, everybody is sitting in the pew. The money is in the churches.
It is present.
Our members are the ones with the businesses and stuff like that. So when we call to our members to give, they give. they give generously, they give willingly. So the church is really part of the community, is actually a subset of the community, but is a community with a sense of the higher calling.
Absolutely. I say, wow.
And
wow.
you know, Jasmine, to pick up on, I'd like to pick up on something you asked in your question, and you asked whether we are, you know, part of a community, are like a different entity.
Are we two different entities?
You know,
Yes,
and
yes.
I thought back and looked at what happened at the beginning when, you know, the news came, and at first we couldn't believe that the church could be shut down. I mean, what?
I know. Yeah.
And I even remember we sat down and thought, are we shutting down? Should we just keep the church open for those who can come? You know, we deliberated and thought about it. And it was amazing to me that the church submitted itself to the guidelines that were given for the entire community to follow. It was almost unimaginable that we would shut down, but we did. And then we thought we would stay away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then we stayed for long. And then we morphed into the new space and could still serve our people and give them hope in that time. And especially, you know, when it came at first, we were really fearful. You remember that airplane that landed and we said, Yani they couldn't just close the borders. Now they have brought this thing to us. Now we are about to die.
Yes.
And the first thing we did was that we organized a national prayer day. You remember that? You know, that was the first, before we had hospitals, before we had anything, you know?
Yes.
And we prayed. And I think a part of us maybe didn't know that God would actually answer for real in practical ways, such that such as our hospitals getting whatever we needed to care for our people who would get infected, and in ways such as God actually just preventing us altogether from contracting the virus at all. And so first of all we prayed together, and then at some point I don't know if you guys saw it. It was a viral video that went out with some of our people, let me call us out as pastors, who were saying, no, you know, you can't tell us to go back to church and social distance. You know, it's, you know, part of prayer and being together in one accord and harmony is, I don't know if you guys saw that. And it was like sort of what we were fighting for our rights to be different from what the community was supposed to be. And that was, I'm glad we didn't go that route, because even though some of us were, wanted to go that direction, I think 90% of the churches agreed to do what the government was calling us to do to keep our community safe. And that really worked well, especially for a country like ours, where we know churches are, like, people are Christians. You know how we say we're 80% Christians? It could be that someone has not really believed, but they come to church. So the fact that the church submitted itself to the guidelines, I think helped the community to function better and keep the infection at bay. And so I thought, as far as that question goes, we really showed that we were part of the community. We didn't spiritualize it and look like, because we are God's people, we will not be infected. And even if we weren't, there are other people who can be infected and actually die from this thing. So even if not for ourselves, we did it for the ones who would be infected, you know? So I think we behaved like we were part of the community. And we should.
Yeah. Thank you, Lorraine, for sharing that.
Yeah, and not to deviate from the topic of COVID, just listening to you about the church submitting, do you know how many lessons that we've taught people about all the things that we speak in the pulpit?
Yeah.
When we tell people submit to authority, the church did submit, not because we understood. No one understood what COVID was all about. Even in our uncertainty, we went and sat below the government. I said, you know what, you've seen probably something we haven't seen. We don't understand why you have said the church should close, and yet we are the ones who pray for the nation. But it's okay, we will submit. So the congregation members in that, because of that action, then know to take the influence of the church, submit. So we take it back home, we take it to the children. So everyone had a way of learning just because of our action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And probably I want to pose a question to this panel and ask, for someone who's probably outside there and feeling like, you telling me to wear a mask, you telling me to social distance, are you questioning the power of God? We have a professional here and we have pastors here. How can we merge the two? How can you encourage that person, and what can you tell them? Is their question valid, first of all? And if it is, what can we answer and tell them? Because I know it's a real, especially when it comes to the church context, it's a real question. Are we questioning that God is able to take this thing away? Are we submitting to fear by keeping the masks on and washing our hands and stuff and and not trusting that God can be able to rescue us from that?
I think the question is very valid. And we would not be honest if we don't admit that at one point or the other we have wrestled. Everybody wrestles with this. Just like we wrestle with the question of God's transcendence. When we, if you lose a loved one, you will ask that question. Is God really in charge? Was he here? Did he care? I mean, Mary and Martha asked that question of Jesus when Lazarus died. If you were here, this wouldn't have happened. It's a question of, are you really the one in charge? And I think it's a valid question. When a pandemic, for example, hits the world, and this is unprecedented because it stopped the world. I think that the Spanish flu kind of was carried more by the soldiers that came from World War I, and they sambazaed it. Although for those days it was still unprecedented because there was not as much travel as there is now. But in terms of stoppage and the comprehensive nature in which this pandemic has brought the world to a standstill, it's completely unprecedented. And when you read scripture, there is no way. I mean, God is concerned about, say, the city of Nineveh. He says, hey, I've got several hundreds of thousands of people here. Shouldn't I care about this? Just the city. He cares about Jerusalem. He cares about even individual families. How much more the entire world when it has been comprehensively affected? And how can we even stop for a moment and imagine that this is not the doing of God? And it's humbling because God takes responsibility for both the good and the bad that happens within a nation. Within his own people, God had said, I caused you to go and hunger in the desert, and you thirsted, and then I fed you with food that you did not know. He takes responsibility. So he allowed this pandemic to come and stop the world, literally. And so the question of God's involvement, it's a foregone conclusion. God is deeply involved. He allowed it to happen, and for a purpose. So we should actually be investigating, why do you think God did this? Because for all of us, we must take time to reflect, because that's an important part of this whole discussion. Why is it that God allowed this to happen? And by me going without a mask, the question of, is that when I'm relying on the power of God, or is that when I'm defying what God has done and allowed to happen? And so we need to, I think as believers, we need to be discerning of the times. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And know that Ecclesiastes 3 is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven. And it includes even times to embrace and refrain, to laugh and to cry, And so God allows seasons. This is a season where everybody in the world has to pause and think, individually, as families, and as a globe. God is doing something, and is a big reset that he's doing to the world. And nobody will be left, And if you ignore the season, you'll be swallowed up in it. And what God has purposed will still happen. But you will have missed out on the lesson. Just like for his people, he would allow a time of war. He would even allow a time when they would come and be overwhelmed by the enemy because of their tendencies. And it was God's doing. And he will come to them and say, don't listen to your prophets when they are telling you, oh, the king of Babylon will not overtake us. He will. And I've allowed him. And if you don't bow your neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, then you will perish. But those who agree to go into exile, they will survive. It's counterintuitive to what we say, the people of God, because we are always saying, we are the ones with the favor of God. But we also forget that there are seasons. And sometimes there's a season in which we have been rebellious and disobedient. And the season is one of judgment, and chastisement by God. And if you don't bow to that chastisement, then you're defying God. Wow. So I think the discernment is very, very important. And for us to know God has allowed this, and it's a time to humble ourselves, go before him, cry out and say, Lord, if we found favor in your eyes, please let this wave of COVID pass and do not let it annihilate us. And God is merciful. He does that.
Indeed.
And he says, even when I'm destroying, I will still leave a remnant. Those who, obey my name, those who call on my name. In fact, many times he'll come and say, for the sake of those, who call on my name, who are obedient, I will even spare the land. So it's a time for us to be discerning, to go before God in humility, and recognize that we can't say that because we're the people of God, we don't deserve this. We actually don't deserve anything. We deserve much worse treatment than what we... In fact, like David said, you don't deal with us according to our sins. Because if you did, none of us would be here. And as Kenyans, we know that our sins are many. They are broadcast. I mean, if you're talking about the Kenyans, anybody who asks about the Kenyans, they know we run.
Yes.
We also do other things, and those other things are not very reputable, Our corruption index is known worldwide, and there are things we do that even other people are startled. How can you do that? Is this not your own country? Why would you do that? So we can't forward a case of deserving, because we are not a righteous nation, truth be told. Even those of us who bear Christian names and who go to churches, we are not a righteous people. We are people who are in need of mercy and not justice. And so we should be on our knees, pleading before God and asking him, please spare us this. And hopefully we can learn some lessons, personally and also as a community.
Wow, incredible. Thank you so much, Bishop. I think that's a perspective I hadn't thought about, that it could actually be consequences of things that we have done. And you alluded to the fact that it's important to reflect on the seasons that we go through and see and discern the times. And so what we'll do, we'll take a short break. And I know each one of us has gone through this season, of course, you have. But I believe there are things that you were thinking about, you were reflecting on. And so as you traveled the world and covered stories, there are things you probably were thinking about, and we would really love to hear that and see what were the reflections and what were the takeouts and what can you charge the people to reflect on. So see you after the break.
Far beyond the sky, where the suffering's over, get my wings and fly. When Jesus says it's over, oh, what joy that will be, where it's no more dreaming, I'll behold at last. I've been dreaming of a city, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. I've been dreaming of a city, Jerusalem, my home right up in the sky. Sometimes I lose direction, Satan clouds my mind, but Jesus stands to remind me that I'm a pass out through. Instead of losing heaven, I must look to the day where it's no more dreaming, I'll be home at last. I've been dreaming of a city, Jerusalem, 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 Jerusalem. I've been dreaming of a city, Jerusalem, my home right up in the sky. Nimengoja hilo jiji, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Nimengoja hilo jiji, Jerusalem, nyumbani juu mbinguni.
hupimwi kwa siku, hupimwi kwa miaka, unatafsiri majira, huzuiwi na muda, umejawa na nguvu, ndiyo maana nakuita Baba. Moyoni mwangu najawa sifa na ujasiri katika wewe, hakuna mlima wa kuniangusha, ndani yako ninasimama, misitekete, siangamii, sigarikishwi, upo nami, misitekete, siangamii, sigarikishwi, upo nami. Nimezungukwa nawe kila pande, hakuna jambo la kuniangamiza.
Karibu sana from the break as we continue with this conversation on some of the reflections we've had during this unique period of our time. And before we go on, I'd like to say hi to a few people who are joining us, just acknowledging them and saying hi to them, because we keep saying we enjoy when we have people interacting with us. And several of you joining us, but I'll just mention a few. Gikonyo Emma saying she's tuned in. We have Warui Elizabeth tuned in. I know she's not in the country. I can't remember quite which country she's in, but karibu sana Elizabeth. We are happy that you're joining us. We have David Nyoike as well. He's tuned in. Priska Wanja, she's tuned in. And then David Nyoike is saying, Kweli, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. Asante sana, David, for that reminder. I see Hortensia as well saying Nikon Dani, and then there's this emoji. I don't, is it a dove emoji? I think that's what it is. Karibu sana. And then Emma is saying, interesting perspective, Bishop. We might think we deserve saving in hard times like COVID, yet we need to plead God to save us as it is a mercy given. Thank you, Emma, for that reminder as well. Kafi saying, always great to have a time of reflection. It's very biblical, actually, taking time to reflect and see what is the Lord doing. And then Warui Elizabeth is saying, greetings from Switzerland. Amejua nimeshindwa kwa wapi. Thank you for letting me know, but karibuni sana sana.
And talking about reflections, indeed, Jasmine, I'm imagining how COVID has impacted us different ways.
Absolutely.
As families, as individuals, as singles, as married, as couples, as a society. And thinking about that, I'm reminded someone was heavily.
That's right.
Heavily pregnant, really, as we were going through COVID. And you were a case in this organization, really. People didn't know, do we carry you, do we shield you, do we tell you don't come to work? Yet there was work to do. It would be really nice to just tell us, how
What was going through my mind.
What was going through our mind. And before you talk to us, I'm also thinking about Anne, as a journalist, really. You can't work from home. Really, you couldn't. Maybe there was something
We
to
needed
do.
those stories.
There's a report to write that could have been done from home. But really, you needed to step out. How are you impacted? What lessons did you learn along the way as an individual, as a journalist, as a mother, as part of the community, really? And you can start us off, and then Lorraine will go.
Indeed, you're very right. This has been a different story for us to cover because we are also in it. We're really affected by it. The way we work, as you say, has completely changed, and we had no idea how we were going to. This is such an important story to tell people, and we need to get out there to tell it. And then getting out there is also very risky. And I have had colleagues who, contracted COVID-19, and it's so real. It's really close home, and apart from that, you start getting to hear of people that you know, people who are close to you, who are unfortunately losing their lives because of this pandemic. And so it's been a time of reflection for us as well. And also just constantly trying to tell this story in a way that will make people care, in a way that will hopefully cause some behavior change, because we need that in order to be able to deal with it. But I think the most touching stories for me have been coming from the frontline health workers. We've spoken to so many of them across the continent, and they're those who sacrificed and moved out of home, for example, because they did not want to put the lives of their families at risk. And doing this with very little support. Here in Kenya, I've seen a picture shared by a friend whose sister is a doctor, and because of shortages of PPE, the personal protective equipment, they improvised. They get polythene bag, the ones that we use for rubbish. They use that, and then you cut the bottom so that it becomes your neck, and then something for the sleeves, because they're really putting their lives at risk to keep us safe. The more reason why we really need to take this seriously. And on one hand, it's real innovation, and it shows real sacrifice from the health workers. But I also think about, as part of a community, what can we do to support them? Speaking to relatives of health workers who say, my daughter works at a private hospital and they're given one N95 mask per month. And this is somebody that we are relying on to look after people who are infected and still go back home to their families. So it's been a moment of reflection for us personally, for me personally, and these are questions that we're still asking. And they really need our support. They are our soldiers. We are at war, and these are our soldiers.
As Anne speaks, it just makes me wonder, what have we become as a society to allow those kinds of conditions? And we all know where the PPEs are. It's a saddening thing. It's a sad narrative about who we are becoming. And even our leadership style that allows people to get away with this kind of thing. Here, it's a double standard. Here is somebody willing to go out on a limb, put their life at risk for you. Here is another one, probably in a leadership position, who doesn't care as long as he can make some money. The fact that PPEs are being held as exhibits because somebody was trying to steal and others were even successfully stolen to make someone rich. Those two extremes should not exist in a society, and I think it's a very sad narrative. We, as a society, I love the fact you're saying, it's a time to reflect, but even as a community, we must reflect who we have become as Kenyans, because that's just not acceptable. In most countries, it's not even spoken of. You wouldn't believe that a community can allow those kinds of values to be broken and for people to put others at risk so that they can get wealthy. It's a sad narrative. We really need a community renewal time.
Indeed, Bishop. And you look at some of the corruption stories that we have covered, and I ask myself, doesn't this person know that the more they do this, the more the virus spreads, and the more likely they are to get it themselves, and they don't know whether they'll survive? It's counterintuitive. They're harming themselves.
Yes.
It raises a very strong moral issue. So when the PPAs or PPEs don't reach the medics to do their job, it questions the morality of the individual. And I know the legal system requires exhibits, but But when people are dying of a pandemic like this, I think there's a moral question there. What is better? It's a legal issue. Truly, it's a legal issue, corruption, theft, and stuff like that. But when an issue of this nature comes to us for the first time, we don't need all the thousands as an exhibit. This is an age of technology. I believe there are ways of still making the evidence available, but at least serve our people. I think we could do something differently. I think one of the reflections from me is how can we do things differently? Must we do things the way we've always done them, even when things are different and when the situation is so new and no one has ever faced this before? So why are we, with this new wine, as it were? So if this is a new wine, why are we putting this new wine in an old new wineskin? It won't hold it. So I think there's a call for everybody, from leaders to individuals, to sit back, think, ask questions of processes, ask questions of needed outcomes, and how we can achieve our goal using a different method, because the method we're using right now is not applicable for the situation we are in. But I've learned good lessons, and I want to speak like a mother and a homemaker. I've learned that when we get busy with everyday life, when we get caught up with the rat race, we can lose control of our homes. And I think many mothers who are career women will hear me here, because we relinquish control to helps. But when COVID came, we didn't know what the next month will look like. We began to let go of our home workers. Another reason why we let them go is so they can be with their families. That meant we don't have the help we normally have at home. And we needed now to regain control of our homes, of our process of making food, making our homes run them well. And it was a huge adjustment. At least for me, it was huge. And I remember sitting down and feeling stranded. And I know it's breakfast time, but I remembered normally breakfast is laid, the table is laid. There was no table laid for me, and no one was bringing breakfast. And actually, it was so funny in my house because everybody took their position on the table.
The table is empty.
It was so mechanical. We all sat down and waited, and then we looked and said, "Oh my goodness."
I even issued a command.
Yes.
Let there be breakfast. There was no breakfast.
None came your way.
Breakfast here. And we quickly mobilized ourselves and breakfast on the table. So the issue of losing control has come to mind. And I realized many women, many career mothers, and like many people like that need to review their position and reconsider their input in their own homes. And I've learned, this is a lesson I learned, the reason why conversations about how girls are not doing their work well is because the mothers are off duty. You know what I'm saying? Eunice hears me. So, and I thought that was a really important lesson for me. And I have found that the more disengaged you are in your home, the more you have no control with what's going on there. And therefore, we lose the authority to complain.
You almost have no right.
You have no right at all to complain.
You weren't present.
You weren't present.
Oh
You
my
don't know what was
goodness.
going on.
Yeah.
And it is a serious one. And because the more I've talked with moms, the career women, the busy ones that they can't go to an office now, they are really appreciating the moments of being at home, teaching their kids, working with their kids, going to the shamba. There's a lady friend of mine who told me the entire family went to the shamba to plant. And they had lunch brought to them by some of the workers to the farm. And they all enjoyed doing something new.
Beautiful. Thank you, Reverend Maggie. And
So
Lorraine,
Oh yeah, my
you mentioned
personal.
you were in a unique one.
Yes.
Yes, we can actually start by asking, were
Yeah.
there any fears? A young wife, here you are carrying a baby, and then this global pandemic comes your way. Did you just, ace it, or what was going through your mind?
Let me tell you, even if I'm a pastor, at that point, it's like my faith disappeared. I was completely terrified
Can imagine.
of the virus because first, let me tell you, I didn't know people could heal from it. Actually, me, I think I came by that information like a month later. I don't know how. I don't know where I was. So first of all, I was convinced that it is a death sentence. And then number two, I started reading up on it. I was pregnant at the time, and I saw that many people say that when you're pregnant, your immunity is lower. So I knew I am at risk.
You're very susceptible.
Yes, I'm very susceptible to the virus. And if I get it, I
That's
will
it.
land to heaven. Now I've been preaching about heaven, so I'll go and find out what the good of the land. The rest of you will follow me there later. And then I wondered, is it that I'm afraid of death? Is it that I don't know what I'm afraid of. I was very paralyzed at the time. Then I started thinking, I thought how, you heard what Bishop said about, many of God's people will think, of course, God will protect me. God protects his people. But me, I have seen stories in the scriptures where I have seen God pursuing his own people to kill them. And I said, if I look into my heart, could it be that God is pursuing me as Lorraine to kill me?
To finish you.
To finish me.
Wow.
So I started taking stock of my life. I remember once I went home after, because we were still coming to work at the time. Lockdowns hadn't happened. And I remember I took time and I pleaded with God for my life and for the life of my child. And I said, God, if me I'm the Moses in this story, please
Spare me.
spare me. I just want to see the face of my child. I need to know what they will look like. And because I was very terrified of God, I was terrified of the virus. I didn't know, because I'm like, God is sovereign over everything. He allowed for this thing to happen. Maybe he even caused it. How do I know?
Yeah.
And I remember it was a long time. And by the time I finished that prayer, I felt like a load had been taken off my back. I don't know why. So maybe I had certain things that God needed to deal with in my heart, and I hadn't taken time to reflect upon them. And so this forced me into that corner.
Yeah.
And after I made that prayer, I felt like God had set me free. You know?
Beautiful.
And then now I started thinking about, what if death actually happens? We talk about it a lot as pastors. We go to mashakayas, we do burials, and I was not even 1 year married, and I was telling God, I just want to enjoy marriage. I'm not saying heaven is not enjoyable. I'm just saying I also want to eat the good of the land on this side before I come to eat the good of the land on the other side.
Paradise.
And so I was pleading with God for my marriage. And then I heard that one of the things about COVID was that it affects men more or something. Men are succumbing to it more than women, I think.
It's true.
And it's true, isn't it? And so I thought, what if my husband dies? How am I having this baby? Am I going to be alone? As in, am I going to get remarried? I usually think about the future, generally in life. So at this point, I thought, I made decisions about what I would do in case that happened. I pleaded with God for the life of my husband because I wanted him to be alive for long so that we can enjoy, this thing. People talk
goodness of
about
the
marriages
Lord.
here. So I wanted to see what the people say, And so it was a difficult period for me for a couple of weeks.
I can imagine.
But for sure, when I went before the house of God, not the house of God, it was in my house, the presence of God, and reflected and prayed and unpacked what was going on in my heart, I felt better equipped to deal with what was coming my way.
Yeah.
And then now I started hearing people are getting better, other people are getting healed. And so I thought, so I can even pray for healing for people who are actually in this space. So I started praying for people who were in that space. So I just went through a whole, season. And then finally, I think God had my prayer. He had mercy. I think the one big takeout for me for this period is that God hears prayers. As in, for sure, God actually hears prayers. So I'm here. I'm not pregnant anymore, as you can see. My baby is here. I have seen his face. And I think I have hope for a future, whether here or there. But I feel like God actually walked with me in that period and set me free from many things that were going on in my mind and my heart at that time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing from your story. It's just telling me or showing us how God uses different ways to call us back to himself. Yours was fear, anxiety, questioning.
Yeah.
But what that eventually led, because you know him, was to go before him and interact with him, and your fears were calm. So thank you so much, guys, for sharing your experiences and reflections. But we haven't heard even from the bishop. We would love to know what was going on. What were some of the reflections you had during this season? What were some of the takeouts? You know, even as the season is ongoing, because we're not out of it yet.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
You know, I knew God is in charge, so I was flowing with it. You know, God and I, we are like, yeah, you know, let's ride this wave. No, seriously though, I really love the fact that even in things like what Reverend Lorraine is sharing, even in times of fear, you know how it causes you eventually to be on your knees, but before God. To me, that's an excellent takeout, and just to be aware that God is might be doing other things in the background that we are not aware of. Will you allow me to just read a scripture that illustrates a point?
Absolutely.
I just thought, as believers, these are some of the things that are lost to us. One of the texts that I read that almost, you know, you don't know what God is doing. You talked about God pursuing you, and it is true, God has pursued his people. Let me read for you one pursuit. Okay, this is in Leviticus, and he's talking about how he's going to judge his people because they have, you know, they're dealing with him treacherously and all that. And then he says something interesting. He says this, Leviticus 26 from verse 32, I will lay waste the land so that your enemies who live there will be appalled. I will scatter you among the nations and will draw out my sword and pursue you. This is God saying about his people. Your land will be laid waste and your cities will lie in ruins. And then listen to this. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbath years, all the time that it lies desolate and you are in the country of your enemies. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. All the time that it lies desolate, the land will have the rest it did not have during the Sabbaths you lived in it. God is executing a judgment, exiling his people so that the land can have rest. Why? Because they had known the seventh year is never to be cultivated. You're to give it rest. But they had become like the current world. You know, we are driven. We want to produce more. So even Sundays, we don't want to rest, you know, because there's no time. And you keep producing. And one of the things we obliterate is time for God. And so even observing a Sabbath rest on a Sunday or on a particular day becomes a problem because we are too busy. Then God decides, oh, really? You're too busy for me? Let me show you what I'm going to do for you. I will take you to a land in exile where God is not worshipped. So you won't even have your Sabbath days. So get out because my land needs a Sabbath rest. So you can imagine, because this really amazed me because it ties down to the next text. They were to be exiled in Babylon for 70 years. So you can imagine how many Sabbaths have been violated for them to accumulate to 70 years.
Of exile.
That's why God says
Interesting.
it's not going to happen sooner. 70 years until the land has its rest. Let me read the second part.
Absolutely.
Jeremiah 29, this one we love, we know. Yeah, but I'll start from verse 4. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. I love that the Lord takes responsibility. I carried you into exile. You know, you're my people, but I took you into exile. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans, the favorite, that one you can even say by heart. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for, to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity. So he says very clearly, you know, when 70 years are completed, so by the time the Lord is allowing a pandemic, he has a start date and an end date. And it will not happen even a day sooner than God has already decreed. And you see, the beauty with this particular scripture, it gives you, it tells you that this thing is already set on the divine calendar, all right? Just like our lives are. But it is not outside of God's control. God has COVID on a leash, just like he has the exile on a leash. And he has said it will take 70 years. But look, he says, don't give up, don't despair. Life is not coming to an end. Because people are now, Jasmine, are looking at, I think it's Lorraine who was asking, how do we embrace 2021? With COVID and with all this terror and fear, how do we do that? God is saying, no. I will carry you into exile. Yes, you are in the disaster, but guess what? I'm still with you. So when you are there, don't stop praying. Pray for the city where I'm sending you. Because if it prospers, you will prosper. In other words, enjoin the issues that you find in that season to God. Because even there is prosperity. And we know what happened to the likes of Daniel, of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. These guys just excelled in the land of Babylon. They probably never saw Israel again in their lifetime. But the 50, 70 years that they lived there, they were prosperous. They rose to high rank and position. They were governors. I think Daniel became prime minister in Babylon, you know, because God's hand was with him. Life will not stop because of COVID. And even if God has decreed that COVID will continue for the next, I don't know.
We don't know.
You know, I don't know years. He says, don't stop what you're doing. When you go there, build houses and live in them. You know, plant vineyards, you know, and reap the fruits thereof. Give your sons and daughters in marriage. Life continues. God is not, you know, he's not standing and then COVID is over there. No. He is working in the COVID. And he's saying, for those of you who love my name and who know me, I will continue to bless you in that season. That's why he says, you know, he's the one who watches over his people to provide water in a dry and thirsty land. It's a dry and thirsty land, but his people are prospering and they're drinking and they're eating and they're happy. But all this is predicated upon the desire to be obedient to the will and the purpose of God. That is our true north as a people of God. So that as a church, we are asking ourselves, how does the 2021 church look like in a post-COVID or in a, you know, in a post-COVID season, which we are in? And we are doing things like this. We never knew we'd be doing shows, except for Anne. Sorry, imagine us hosting Anne. You know, she works for the BBC. But God is versatile and is asking his people to transform and to think and to see what he is doing. And as we do that, then he gives us innovation. He gives us creativity. He gives us resilience. He gives us wisdom. Because this word of the kingdom must continue. It must be heard to the whole world. And you know, we are now probably reaching more people than we ever reached before. Because, I mean, anybody can just tune in into YouTube, into Facebook, and from the comfort of wherever they are, they will hear the word of God. Because God has said that this word of his, you know, it will fill the whole earth as the waters cover the sea. And that's one of the signs of the end times. That, you know, in those days, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached to the whole earth as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come. So global evangelism has already been, you know, prophesied. And what better way to get it out there than through the media? And so this is happening in real time, you know. And so God is not outside of this. He's fully in charge. We are to continue to obey and follow the will and the purpose of God regardless of what comes. Because he's a God who commands, I mean, he heals our diseases and he keeps us away from pestilences. So we can march into 2021 with confidence and ask God, what plan do you have for us? And then we live it out in obedience.
Thank you.
And that is so compelling, Pastor Charles, because this December is so different from the December of 2019. We all had lists and lists and lists of dreams, aspirations, and plans, grand ones, because we were going to a double digit. Is that what you're saying?
Double everything.
You know, and we were burying the past. We quoted Isaiah, forget the things of the past, but, you know, and this year we're seated, almost paralyzed, really, so to speak. But I like that you say, you know what, go back, do those lists, submit them before the Lord, commit them before the Lord, you know, in His sovereignty. He will work things out for us and for the world, for our families, for our children, for our marriages, for those that are singles looking forward to get married. You know, He's ushering us to a new space. And so I'm excited. I'm excited, you know. And maybe to just conclude, what's exciting you and in your field, you know?
I think it's really looking at the silver lining in all this. As Bishop has mentioned, it has changed the way we look at things. It has transformed how we do things. And hopefully some of these positive transformations are going to last. For me personally, being a mother who travels constantly, often at short notice, I tuck the kids in bed, and in the morning I'm gone. They don't see me. I call them from the airport. So it's been a blessing in disguise to be able to just stay at home with them and, you know, spend more time with them, and also to learn to do a lot of things remotely. So that's one thing that I hope we will carry into the future, to still be effective while working from home.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing meaningfully. It's beautiful listening at what God is doing, at what one is reflecting and seeing amidst this maelstrom. There's so many beautiful gems, you know, to behold, to hold on to, and many beautiful lessons to learn, and seeing that God has sustained us all through. So we are really, really thankful. And before we end the show, we mentioned that today is the season finale. You know, can you imagine? I mean, it always feels nice to say that, season finale. It feels like it's been a series of a movie we've been shooting. So season 1 ends today. We'll be taking a Christmas break, but I'll not do the job of saying kwaheri and thanking people and all that. I'll invite Reverend Maggie. I mentioned earlier that she is the brainchild of this beautiful show that has helped so many of us. So I want to invite her to take charge of that space.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I'm actually very delighted to be able to say that God has led us since we started the show way back in March, and it's been many months of God's faithfulness. So I want to be able to take a bit of time and say thank you to all our panelists, all our guests who have come here and ministered with us, to you, our amazing congregation. I know one of the things I've said is that we really have had the best panelists. We have had journalists here, represented by Annie. We have had doctors, we have had lawyers, we have had counselors, we have had clinical psychologists, the works. Our pastors have been with us, our technical people, our friends, our viewers, they have made this possible, and I want to say thank you for being able to share this amazing opportunity with us. It's been an amazing opportunity, I must say that.
Yeah,
guys.
it is.
Yeah, serving the Lord in this way.
It is.
So I want to say thank you for allowing me to serve you in this new way, in this new season, and all of us adjusting to this ministry together. But before I finally hand it over to you, I think I'll hand it over to you to sum it up after a minute, is to say I do have a challenge for us. Even as I thank us, I want to challenge us to think of means and ways we can be better people in the next year. And I must say, for our leaders, our leadership, I want to call us to greater level or sense of stewardship. The Bible in the book of Exodus 25 and verse 17 says, "Do not take advantage of each other, but instead fear God." An invitation to fear in God, to live in fear of the one who has command of our lives, of our beginning and of our end. The one who holds us on a leash, who can say today COVID is over and it's over. So I want to invite our leaders to a greater and a higher level of stewardship and to fear God, so that we may steward these resources that we've been bestowed with in a better way. Then I also want to challenge us, even as I thank us, to embrace this great freedom. There's a great freedom in doing right. No one will pursue us when we do right. We will honor God when we do what is right. So let our leaders, let anyone with a responsibility seek to do right. Just enjoy the freedom of doing right. It's a big thing, it's a great thing. And then challenge us to think about our medics, especially our medics. The story Anne has told us here, it's really nice that medics are innovative. They go beyond the call of duty. They even get a big plastic dustbin bag and make it a PPE. There's innovation there. There's creativity there. There is all good things we can say. But let's help our medics so they can do their work. So I invite us as a congregation, Mamlaka Youth Chapel, both Ruaka and City, to trust us so that we can care better for our medics. So if you have any cent to spare or to use sacrificially, be sacrificial and bring it to us. We will make sure that no doctor has to cut a plastic bag. We will do that. Let them do the work, it's hard work. But let's be there for them. Again, some of them need to be in isolation. Let's be there for them. As a church, come on, let's do this for them. Let's make our care packages targeted for our medics. Throw in a chocolate there, throw in something like even airtime, something that says we care. And you know, our church is so blessed. We have so many medics, both in city and here. We can show them we care. They care for us. Let's care for them this time. Lastly, let me use the work of, let me add that 1 mask a month, well, I would have said it's ridiculous, but let me say it is ridiculous, but it's not acceptable. We shouldn't allow that to happen when we are seated down. Let's do something about it. We are great givers. So Mamlakite, you are great givers. Please give. Let's do something. Let's make sure they don't have 1 a month. They have 1 for fewer days, right? And then lastly say, the question of purpose and focus for each individual Kenyan at this time is being addressed to us this season. That if you ever doubted who you are for, what you are here for in this world, where God placed you here, rethink that. And let us as a church help you walk that journey of rethinking that. So if you're wondering what's your purpose, we know, we pray. And God in heaven will hear your prayer and will reset our purpose and our focus as citizens of this country. May the Lord bless all of us.
Amen.
As a congregation, as friends of Mamlaka, listening from Switzerland, from the US, from Canada. You guys have listened from everywhere. You become a family. Let's continue to be this family that not only cares, but cares in practical ways.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
Thank you.
Back
Thank
to
you so
Jasmine.
much, Reverend Maggie.
Yes, but I mustn't add yet. Because I haven't said thave you.
Well, you have.
You know, guys, for 4 weeks I've been away. I took a short break. I really needed it. But Eunice and Jasmine have been amazing.
It's been an honor.
Thank you guys for studying in and doing an amazing job. I think a testimony that community is it. We are not alone. We serve together. Thank you for being co-workers in this particular way, in this new way. We never did shows, but we did. We have ministered, and it's been a joy to have you, step in for me. Please accept my appreciation, and may the Lord bless you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. It's
Yeah,
been an
thank
honor.
you so much for giving us the opportunity. We are thankful to you,
Yes.
and we trust that you got the rest that you needed.
That she deserved.
Yes, and she
It was
deserved.
well deserved.
I even went all the way to Mount Kenya,
Oh,
and I touched
amen.
Lenana.
Amen.
Yeah, because you
amen,
guys were there.
amen,
So thank you so
amen.
much.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It's
And
such
thanks
a
to our media team. You guys also, I must say thank you to you for making this happen. Week after week, and there's a time we could do even 3 recordings in a day. And you guys were there, you didn't tire. Blessings to you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Asante sana, Reverend Maggie, and to our panelists for today, asanteni sana sana. It's been a joy and an honor, an exciting discussion that we've had today. And I think it's right to say, for me to say, that that's it from Midweek Vibes Desk for this season. For this season, and I think it's appropriate to even say Merry Christmas, right, team? Right?
Merry
So,
Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
We pray that you'll have a blessed break and that we'll get to see you in the next season. So the Lord bless you so much.